6 friends played hide-and-seek at an abandoned camp, but 7 people went into hiding, and one of them wasn't human. The midnight hide-and-seek. 3, 2, 1. Ready or not, here I come. Jake's voice rang through the night as he opened his eyes. The abandoned summer camp stretched before him, its empty cabins bathed in the pale glow of the full moon. The game had begun. 6 friends had arrived at Camp Hollow earlier that evening, eager for a weekend of adventure. It had been abandoned for years, surrounded by eerie rumors of campers vanishing without a trace. The perfect setting for a late-night game of hide-and-seek. Jake, Olivia, Mark, Lisa, Ben, and Sophie had all agreed that playing at midnight would make things more exciting. Now, as Jake turned in a slow circle, scanning the darkened camp, a shiver ran down his spine. The night was silent, too silent. He stepped away from the rotting wooden porch of the main lodge, his flashlight flickering as he moved. The cabins stood like forgotten tombs, their windows empty and black. Somewhere out there, his friends were hiding, waiting to be found. He started with the nearest cabin, pushing open the door. The air inside was stale, filled with the scent of damp wood and decay. He swung the flashlight around. Empty bunks, broken furniture, dust dancing in the beam. No one here. A faint giggle echoed from outside. Jake turned sharply. The sound had come from the trees near the lake. Grinning, he crept toward the sound, stepping lightly over fallen branches. Behind a rusted canoe, he spotted a familiar pair of sneakers. "Gotcha, Lisa," Lisa groaned as she crawled out. "Ugh, you found me already." "You giggled," Jake teased. "I did not," Lisa protested. "I was holding my breath the whole time." Jake frowned. If Lisa hadn't laughed, then who had? Shaking off the uneasy feeling, he continued his search. One by one, he found the others. Mark hiding behind a collapsed tent. Olivia crouched inside a storage shed. Ben buried under a pile of leaves. That left Sophie. As the group regrouped near the main lodge, Olivia did a quick head count. Then she frowned. "Wait, there's still one more person hiding." Jake nodded. "Yeah, Sophie." "No," Olivia said slowly. I remember 7 people running to hide." A heavy silence fell over the group. Lisa wrapped her arms around herself. "Are you sure?" Jake hesitated. He had closed his eyes and counted to 30. When he opened them, he saw 7 figures darting into the darkness. He had been sure of it. A rustling sound came from the farthest cabin, the one no one had dared to hide in. Its roof had partially collapsed, and most of the floorboards were broken. It was dangerous. Maybe Sophie got stuck, Ben suggested, though he didn't sound convinced. Jake swallowed. Only one way to find out. He led the way, his flashlight trembling slightly in his grip. The cabin door was slightly ajar, swaying in the breeze. A faint chill seeped from within. Jake pushed the door open. The inside was darker than the night itself. His flashlight flickered, casting eerie shadows against the rotting walls. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth. And then, movement. Shape crouched in the farthest corner. His breath caught in his throat. Sophie. The shape didn't answer. His friends stood frozen behind him. The figure slowly straightened. It was small, like a person, but its limbs were too long. its posture too stiff. Then, in a voice that wasn't Sophie's, it whispered, "Found you." A shock of cold shot through Jake's spine. The flashlight flickered wildly as the shape lunged forward. The door slammed shut. A sharp, echoing scream pierced the night. And then, silence. A scream split the night, raw and filled with terror. Jake stumbled back as the cabin door slammed shut on its own, separating him from whatever had just moved inside. His heart pounded in his chest like a hammer. The others stood frozen, their faces pale in the moonlight. "What was that?" Lisa whispered, clutching Mark's arm. Jake reached for the doorknob, his fingers trembling. Sophie might be in there. Ben grabbed his wrist before he could turn it. "Jake, that wasn't Sophie." Silence settled over them, thick and suffocating. Then, scratching, soft at first, like fingernails running down the wooden walls from inside the cabin. Then it grew louder, more frantic. Something wanted out. "Forget this. We need to go," Olivia said, her voice shaking. "I don't care if it's part of the game. Something's wrong. We can't just leave her," Jake protested. Mark hesitated before nodding toward the boarded-up window on the side of the cabin. "We should check from outside first." They hurried around the building, careful not to trip over the overgrown roots snaking through the ground. The window was covered in grime, its glass cracked in places. Jake wiped a section clean with his sleeve and peered inside. The cabin was empty. No crouching figure, no sign of Sophie. Just dust, broken floorboards, and a single overturned chair in the center of the room. Jake's stomach twisted. No, she was just in there. Lisa shook her head, stepping away from the window. "This place is cursed." "No," Ben said, voice tight. "It's something worse than that." Suddenly, footsteps echoed from the woods behind them. Slow, deliberate steps, moving over dry leaves and snapping twigs. The group turned as one. At the edge of the tree line, a figure stood, motionless, their breath caught. It was Sophie, but something was wrong. She stood too still, her arms hanging limply at her sides, her head tilted slightly, as if listening. The shadows clung to her face, making her features hard to see. "Sophie," Jake called. She didn't answer. Lisa took a hesitant step forward. "Hey, are you okay?" Still no response. A cold breeze swept through the trees. And that's when they noticed Sophie's hair wasn't moving with the wind. Her clothes barely rustled. Jake's pulse raced. "Sophie, say something." Slowly, she lifted her right arm and pointed behind them, toward the cabin. Then, in a whisper that didn't sound like her own, she said, "It's still in there." Jake's breath hitched. Lisa grabbed his sleeve. "We have to go. Now." The others didn't need convincing. They turned and sprinted toward the main lodge, their footsteps pounding against the earth. Jake risked a glance back. Sophie was gone, not walking away, not moving, just gone. Fear clawed at his chest. They didn't stop running until they reached the main lodge, where they collapsed onto the creaky wooden floor, gasping for breath. "We're leaving," Olivia panted. "I don't care how late it is. We are not staying here." Ben nodded. "Agreed. We get to the car and drive. Now." Mark cursed under his breath. "The keys. They're in my bag. Back at the tents." A terrible realization sank in. The tents were set up near the lake, on the other side of the camp. They would have to go back into the darkness. Jake's hands clenched into fists. Then we moved together. No splitting up. Everyone nodded, but the fear in their eyes was unmistakable. They took one last look at the empty doorway before stepping back into the night. And behind them, in the darkness of the lodge, something let out a low, breathy laugh. Do you want to continue to Chapter 3, or make any changes to this part? The night felt heavier now, as if the air itself had thickened around them. Each step toward the lake seemed to take more effort, their bodies weighed down by an unseen force. The flashlight beams danced over the twisted tree roots and patches of dead leaves, casting long shadows that seemed to move when they weren't looking. Jake led the way, gripping his flashlight so tightly that his knuckles turned white. Lisa walked close beside him, her breathing uneven. Olivia and Ben followed in silence, while Mark brought up the rear, glancing over his shoulder every few steps. No one spoke. They didn't have to. The only sounds were the crunching of their footsteps and the occasional rustling in the bushes, though none of them dared to check what was making the noise. Mark was the first to break the silence. I still don't understand, he muttered. Sophie was in the cabin. Then she was outside. Then she just disappeared. Jake swallowed hard. I don't think that was Sophie. Ben let out a nervous chuckle. Come on, man. What else would it be? No one answered. The lake came into view, its dark waters reflecting the moonlight in broken, rippling patterns. Their tents stood just beyond the shore, untouched. The campfire they had lit earlier had burned down to weak embers, barely glowing. Mark sprinted ahead, unzipping his tent in a hurry. Keys, keys, he muttered, rummaging through his bag. Jake and Olivia stood near the water's edge, their eyes scanning the trees. A faint mist had begun to rise from the lake, creeping toward them like grasping fingers. Lisa shivered. I don't like this, Ben nodded. Let's just get the keys and go. Mark let out a breath of relief as he pulled the car keys from his bag. Got them. A twig snapped behind them. They all froze. The sound had come from just beyond the tents, near the tree line. Jake turned his flashlight toward the noise. At first, there was nothing, just darkness and shifting mist. Then, a figure stepped forward. Sophie. She stood at the edge of the trees, motionless, watching them. Her face was hidden in shadow, but her body was rigid, unnatural. Jake's throat tightened. Sophie. She didn't respond. Lisa took a shaky step forward. Sophie, we're leaving. Come with us. Still, no response. Then, without warning, Sophie's head snapped to the side at an impossible angle. The crack of bone echoed through the night. Lisa screamed. The flashlight flickered. And in that split second of darkness, Sophie was suddenly closer, too close. Her eyes, now visible in the dim light, were wrong, hollow, empty. Ben grabbed Lisa's arm and yanked her backward. Run! They bolted toward the dirt path leading back to the parking lot, not daring to look back. The keys jingled in Mark's grip as he ran. Behind them, footsteps pounded against the earth. Fast. Too fast. Jake risked a glance over his shoulder. Sophie, or whatever was wearing her form, was chasing them, her limbs jerking unnaturally as she moved. The parking lot was just ahead. Mark reached the car first, fumbling with the keys. Come on, come on. Lisa yanked the back door open, diving inside. Olivia and Ben scrambled in after her. Jake shoved Mark toward the driver's seat before throwing himself into the passenger side. Mark's hands shook as he jammed the key into the ignition. The engine sputtered. The footsteps stopped. Jake looked up. Sophie stood just outside the car's headlights. Her mouth opened, stretching too wide, and a whisper floated toward them, carried by the wind. "You can't leave," the car roared to life. Mark didn't hesitate. He slammed his foot on the gas. The last thing they saw before speeding down the road was Sophie standing in the middle of the lot, her head tilted, watching them go. Then, just as the car crossed the camp's exit, she vanished. Jake's breathing was ragged as he clutched the dashboard. His heart was pounding, his mind racing. No one spoke. No one knew what to say. They had escaped. But something told Jake this wasn't over. Something had followed them. The road stretched before them, empty and dark. The car's headlights cut through the night, illuminating nothing but endless trees on either side. The only sounds were the rumble of the tires against the pavement and the ragged breaths of the 5 friends inside. Nobody spoke. Lisa was curled up in the back seat, arms wrapped around herself. Olivia sat beside her, staring blankly out the window. Ben kept glancing at the rearview mirror, as if expecting to see something following them. Mark gripped the steering wheel so tightly, his knuckles were white. His foot pressed harder on the gas, desperate to put as much distance between them and Camp Hollow as possible. Jake sat in the passenger seat, his mind racing. He kept replaying what had happened. Sophie standing in the trees, her head twisting unnaturally. That whisper, "You can't leave." They had left, but had they really escaped? A shiver crawled down Jake's spine. He slowly turned to glance at the back seat. Lisa, Olivia, and Ben were there, but something felt wrong. Jake's fingers curled against his jeans. "Mark," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Mark didn't look at him. "What?" Jake hesitated. The air inside the car suddenly felt heavy, like the pressure had changed. He swallowed, to a head count. Mark's eyebrows furrowed. "What?" Jake turned his head slowly, looking at each person in the back. "Just count." Lisa looked up, confused. "Jake, what are you talking about?" Ben let out a nervous chuckle. "Dude, it's just us." Jake didn't answer. 1, 2, 3. His stomach dropped. There were 4 people in the back seat. Jake's breath hitched. His pulse pounded in his ears. Lisa, Olivia, Ben, and someone else. He couldn't see their face. They were sitting in the farthest corner, half in shadow. Their head was tilted down, hair covering their features. Jake's throat tightened. "Who?" The figure lifted its head. A pair of hollow, empty eyes met his. Jake's scream got caught in his throat. Mark saw it too. His foot slammed on the brake. The car screeched to a stop in the middle of the deserted road. Lisa and Olivia yelped as they were thrown forward. Ben shouted, "What the?" Jake fumbled for the door handle, his breath coming in short gasps. He shoved the door open and stumbled out, nearly falling to his knees on the cold pavement. Lisa and Olivia scrambled out after him. Ben followed, looking around wildly. What happened? Why did we stop? Jake turned to Mark, who was frozen in place, still gripping the wheel. His face was pale. Mark, Jake stammered. Mark's hand trembled as he pointed toward the back seat. Jake forced himself to look. The back seat was empty. The fourth person, whatever it had been, was gone. Lisa wrapped her arms around herself, her entire body shaking. "I don't understand," she whispered. "There were only 3 of us in the back, right?" Ben's hands curled into fists. No, Jake saw it. Mark saw it. He turned to Olivia. "You had to have seen it too." Olivia's face was pale. She shook her head. I don't know. I felt something." Mark finally spoke, his voice hoarse. It was her. Nobody needed to ask who he meant. Sophie, or whatever had been pretending to be her. Jake looked back at the road. The trees stood still in the distance, nothing moving between them. There was no sign of anyone or anything chasing them, but that didn't mean they were safe. Mark swallowed hard. "We're not stopping again. Get back in the car." Nobody argued. They climbed back in, locking the doors behind them. Mark hit the gas, the car speeding down the road. Jake's hands curled into fists as he stared straight ahead. They had left the camp hollow, but something had left with them, and it wasn't done playing. The car raced down the road, the wind howling against the windows. No one spoke. No one even breathed too loudly. The weight of what had just happened settled over them like a heavy fog. Lisa gripped her seatbelt, her knuckles pale. Olivia stared straight ahead, her hands shaking in her lap. Ben was tense, his eyes darting between the side mirrors and the road ahead. Mark pressed harder on the gas. "We're not stopping until we reach the city," he muttered. Jake wasn't convinced that distance would save them. Something had followed them, something that shouldn't exist. He turned hesitantly to check the back seat again. Lisa, Olivia, Ben, no one else. Jake let out a slow breath, trying to steady himself. "What do we do?" he asked. Mark clenched his jaw. "We forget this ever happened." Lisa scoffed. "You think we can just forget?" Her voice wavered. "We left Sophie back there." Jake shook his head. "That wasn't Sophie." The car fell into silence again. Then, a giggle. Soft, playful. It echoed through the car, bouncing off the walls, like it came from everywhere at once. Lisa gasped. "Tell me someone else heard that." Jake's stomach twisted. It was the same laugh they had heard at the cabin. The same one from the lodge. The same one from the shadow in the back seat. Mark's hands were clammy against the wheel. "We're almost at the highway," he muttered, as if that would fix anything. The laughter grew louder. It was close. Jake's eyes darted to the rearview mirror. His breath caught. In the mirror's reflection, the back seat wasn't empty. She was there. Sophie. No, the thing pretending to be Sophie sat between Lisa and Ben, her head tilted at an unnatural angle, her hollow eyes locked onto Jake's. A wide, unsettling grin stretched across her face. She lifted a single finger to her lips. "Shh." The car swerved. Mark cursed, jerking the wheel back. What? What did you see?" Jake twisted around to look. Empty. But the giggle hadn't stopped. It was circling them, coming from everywhere at once. Then the car's headlights flickered. The world outside changed. The road was gone. The trees had vanished. Instead, they were back at Camp Hollow. Lisa let out a choked gasp. No, we left. The engine sputtered. The headlights dimmed. The car rolled to a stop in front of the old cabin. The door creaked open by itself, and the voice came. "It's your turn to hide." The wind howled. The trees shuddered. And then the lights went out.